Today, I just wanted to make a short video about why I don't mind the silent protagonists of the Persona series. I know its counterpart series, Shin Megami Tensei, also typically features silent protagonists as well. However, I don't really have any strong feelings about how it's done there. I also don't particularly have any strong feelings towards Persona 1 and 2's use of silent protagonists. Persona 1 guy is very clearly just supposed to be a vessel or a window for the player to witness the story and the Jungian imagery. Tatsuya is a weird case where he's silent in Innocent Sin but talks in Eternal Punishment. Maya's the opposite, where in Innocent Sin she speaks, but as a main character in Eternal Punishment she doesn't. In certain flashbacks of Innocent Sin's events in Eternal Punishment, Tatsuya is the one talking and Maya's the one giving less input. Perhaps the idea is that from our own personal perspectives, we put more emphasis on taking in what everyone else around us is saying, aside from the parts where we give our own direct input. I don't know, I'm not here to talk about the semantics of how the hell it works in-universe. I simply want to explain why it shouldn't, nor does it hurt the story, or the game, or even the characters themselves. In fact, I'd go as far to say that it kind of helps the games. I've pretty much said all I have to say about SMT and Persona 1 and 2. And yes, I will be briefly addressing spin-offs and anime adaptations. I'll get to it later in the video. Okay, all you so-called free thinkers, time to debunk your singular meme that you like to perpetually repost. You've probably heard the whole spiel about being a self-insert and how you determine how the protagonist interacts with people. Personally, I think it goes deeper than that. It's not just a matter of projection. Immersing the player into the game requires more than just a silent protagonist. The Hashino Persona games are largely part life sim. Immersion is what the entire life aspect is. It's not just the implicit traits the protagonists have that resonate with them, though I won't deny that does play a role in it as well. Each game simulates a completely different experience. Depending on what the player's own life experiences are, they might relate more with what one protagonist experiences in their day-to-day life more than another's. Which game most accurately depicts your daily grind? Did you have a bedtime or did you stay out really late? What kind of places did you hang around? And most importantly, what kind of people did you meet? After all, people are largely shaped by their environment. The way each Persona game presents the people it surrounds you with can also greatly influence which protagonist one would like better. Maybe the types of social links in one game resemble the type of people you're used to seeing, or perhaps the way said people are portrayed is similar to how you perceive people in general. Even the way each protagonist is placed into their social situation varies, and how much players relate to it can vary from person to person. The one thing the Hashino protagonists have in common is that they're essentially thrown into a new setting and start on a clean slate. The difference is in how it's imposed. For myself personally, I relate to Persona 3. In Persona 3, you're kinda thrown into a situation where you know nobody, and you're not particularly eager to make friends, but given the circumstances, it would behoove you to do so. Sure, some of the people in your life are odd, you might even find some of them kind of annoying. Not all of them are the most motivated or the best people, but just the sheer act of spending time with someone can soften you up to them. Sure, they're not the ideal kinds of friends, but hey, I doubt you're exactly someone who has never annoyed anybody ever. You've never been unreasonably stubborn, unmotivated, unsure of yourself, or cynical. No. Not the pure, sinless player base of Persona. For me, Persona 3 was a journey of learning to appreciate the presence of people in my life more. This is not only reflected in the protagonist and his social links, but with his allies as well. Everyone's pretty neutral and keeps to themselves at first, but slowly begins to warm up to each other. The female protagonist experiences many of the same events and a good chunk of the same people. What makes her experience distinct is how she perceives that very same world differently, as shown reflected in her change of soundtrack. I wouldn't really say her soundtrack is happier than the original like a lot of people would say. Persona 3 has always had a lot of upbeat tracks in addition to its more somber or serious tunes. While the male route featured chill and laid-back music, the female route's music is warmer. In fact, the only happier thing that I can think of about FeMC's story is that a character goes from dead to comatose, given the right conditions. Even then, that's not exactly what I would consider happy, that's just less sad in comparison. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I'm having trouble making a case that she's inherently happier. To me, it just looks like she's being less stoic and showing more emotion. This is honestly pretty accurate, since there is sort of a societal expectation for men to neither address their sorrows in a healthy manner, nor act too fruity, so to speak. And of course, women also have their own expectations placed onto them. Being sweet and friendly, maybe a tad bit of spunk if you're looking for something a little more fun. Not that there's anything wrong with being sweet or friendly, if anything, I'd say those things are good. I mean, I guess that's happier in comparison to her male counterpart, but that's compared to showing very little emotion at all. So I suppose the takeaway here is that being girly constitutes as too happy for Persona 3. But hey, some people don't necessarily care about Persona 3's realisms. They just want to be surrounded by nice people who make you happy. Maybe you prefer something like Persona 4. In this game, you roll into town and people kinda outcast you for being a city boy out in the countryside. They make presumptions about you that you think you're cooler than everyone. Not everyone hates you though, because pretty quickly you start to meet people who feel just as lonely and misunderstood as you. And then you all become best friends. I can see why people think this game's for lonely people now. Though, for a lot of people, wish fulfillment is the whole point of the game. Games are an escape for a lot of people, so I can understand why they might enjoy this more. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Persona 5 kinda follows suit with the people not liking you thing, except they commit to it more. Like, people actually think you're a bad person and actively avoid you. Thus, the way you end up meeting people and making new friends tends to be less conventional. Hey, if you're someone who's used to having more friends outside of school than in it, this might be for you. Maybe you're just a theater kid. Joker always sorta gave me that vibe with how he plays himself up in the costume, putting up a show. This one's probably the one I relate to the least, so I'm kinda just throwing stuff at the wall until it sticks. I'm not even sure if people like Joker because they relate to him or his experience. Perhaps Joker falls into a completely different category than the previous protagonists. It's kind of hard for me to even perceive Joker as a mute character. He gets way more dialogue options than the other protagonists, and speaking lines in gameplay. There is one specific scene where his dead silence speaks volumes more than any words they could have ever written. It's the scene where An breaks down about being exploited by Kamoshida. Just his body language and the look on his face at the end say it all. I'm getting a bit off topic though. I'm not saying that silence is better or anything crazy like that. The point I'm trying to make here is that I don't think the lack of words on the protagonist's part has ever really hurt the story or game in any way. The funny thing about these games is despite being a life sim for you, the real focus is on everything and everyone around you. Most stories center themselves around the protagonist and their development, with most other characters acting as support. In Persona, you support everyone else. You may be the main character of your own story, but you're not the main character of the universe. That's not how the people you encounter will see you. Thus, I don't see any real need to emphasize anything the protagonist is saying or have them momentarily draw attention away from the other characters, who are the real focal point of the social links and even most story events. That's not to say you can't make it work. After all, Soul Hackers 2 has a talking protagonist, and I never really found her too intrusive on anyone else's arcs. But also keep in mind Soul Hackers 2's cast is far from what most people consider to be peak character writing. While things like a speaking protagonist and an adult cast of characters aren't inherently bad things, they're not some magic ticket to improving your characters, like a lot of people seem to think. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment has a good cast of characters, but they're not good just because being adults makes them inherently better or more relatable. They're relatable because they're well written. The same goes for talking protagonists. Ringo's not a good protagonist because she's talkative. She's good because of what she learns about humanity as an AI. Persona protagonists are good despite not having too much verbal input because their purpose doesn't really require it. You're there to be a good friend, and a large part of being a good friend is just saying less and being a good listener. Hey, just wanted to interrupt the video real quick to say that I have a Patreon. I post pretty much any and all updates regarding videos there and even share some exclusive goodies on occasion. You also get your name in the video too. I also have a second channel where I talk about other topics. If you want to help broaden my content, then consider checking both of these out. The extra support would really be helpful. Okay, thanks, back to the video. Alright, yeah, I know, the protagonists can talk in the spin-offs. Well, kinda. In the Persona Q games, the protagonist you play as only has battle quotes. The one you don't play as is treated like a normal character, which makes sense. Their personalities are pretty simplified, much like most characters in spin-offs. In Persona 4 Arena and Ultimax, the protagonist not only speaks, but uses his name from the anime, Narukami. I haven't seen the Persona 4 anime, but I assume the Arena games just sort of imported his character in the anime. The dancing games also give the protagonist dialogue, but only Yu is given spoken dialogue and character exchanges. This is likely because Persona 4 Dancing is the only one with a proper story to it. I haven't seen the Persona 5 animation, but I heard it existed. I've seen the Persona 3 movies, they're alright I guess. I also just remembered the stage plays are a thing. Wow, I guess they really do talk. So of course, the reason they made the protagonists' characters in these adaptations is because these are more traditional stories that are focused around the protagonist and their journey. These guys are given their own arcs that you can see progress throughout the story, especially in the Persona 3 movies considering its lack of social link presence. It's simply the way the medium works, unlike the games. The same applies to games like Arena and Dancing All Night. Your perspective jumps between multiple characters, and it wouldn't really work if only the protagonist could talk. But hey, who knows, maybe you might prefer these characterizations of the protagonists. I think they're cool. I said a long time ago in my last video about protagonists that protagonist characters in these games tend to be pretty volatile, allowing for multiple different interpretations of them. When the medium requires a character, then they'll make a character. In the games, however, the protagonist isn't exactly a concrete character. In both a literal and figurative sense, they are the face of the game. Without the game, the protagonist is nothing, and without the protagonist, there is no game. When you think of it that way, it's no wonder why people still place so much value in these stand-in characters, despite their lack of words or self-centric character development. They aren't what the game or story shapes them to be. Rather, they are what you, the player, take away from their journey. Has it reshaped your view of the world around you, or how you view people in general? God, I'd sure hope. These games are riddled with social commentary. But you didn't prove that the Persona protagonists are good characters! That was never the point of this video. My goal was to show the value they have regardless of that. If the question being asked here is, are Persona protagonists good characters? The answer is probably not, and that's because the protagonist isn't really a character. The protagonist is an experience.